Hey, it's Marley. Welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be doing my July reading wrap up, so talking about all the books that I read in the month of July. As always, before we get into the individual book reviews, I'm going to quickly go over my reading stats for the month. So I ended up reading 7 books this month. They actually ended up all being featured in the reading blogs that I put out this month, so I will link those down below if you want to check them out. The number of pages I read was approximately 2,988, so nearly at 3,000. Hours listened was 0. We didn't have any audiobooks this month. And my average rating was 3.79. So kind of average, pretty decent. Books acquired was 3. And then own voices was actually 5. So we had a higher own voices reading month, which is nice to see. In terms of genre this month, we had quite the variety. We did have 3 contemporary novels though. 1 thriller, 1 romance, 1 nonfiction, and 1 fantasy. In terms of the format, as I said, no audiobooks, but 5 of the books I read physically. So that's great to get the physical books off my TBR, and then 2 ebooks. In terms of the audience of the books that I read, 4 of them were adult and actually 3 were young adult. And in terms of author gender, we had 6 female authors and 1 male author. And in terms of author status, to me, 5 of the authors I had read from before, and only 2 of the authors I read were new to me. In terms of year published for the books I read, 2 of the books came out this year in 2025. Then 1 was from 2023, and the rest were a little older. We had 1 from 2020, 1 from 2019, 1 from 2016, and 1 from 2015. So yeah, let's just get into the book reviews, and I will talk about these books in the order of my lowest rated up into my highest rated. I did have a 5-star read this month, so definitely stay till the end to see what was the 5-star. First up, my least favorite book of the month was Late Bloomers: The Power of Patience in a World Obsessed with Early Achievement by Karlgaard. This was the nonfiction book. I really just picked this up on a whim from a used bookstore because it was like $2, and I was trying to read more nonfiction, but unfortunately this one was just not for me. I think I want to branch out and read a lot more nonfiction in the next year. Like I might make it a goal for 2026 to read more nonfiction, but I think this is one that I probably should not have bothered picking up. I think there'd be way more interesting stuff, but I kind of thought the title Late Bloomers was talking about kind of in general people who are late bloomers in multiple aspects of their lives. I thought that could be interesting, but Rich really focus on being a late bloomer in your career, and it was very career focused. And so I think if you are someone who identifies with that, then this book might be for you, and it might be quite inspiring. He does talk about how the world, and especially America specifically, is very obsessed with early achievement and the different ways that we see that, such as how parents will, put their very young kids into these advanced special schools because they want their kid to, be the smartest kid, to get into the best school when they're older. There's just such a pressure on young kids to achieve quite early. We see it with athletes a lot. We see it in the tech world a lot, of these young people achieving things so early on, and it's very highly talked about. And how there's also this negative stigma around late bloomers, people who don't have their careers quite figured out until a little bit later in life. So yeah, if that sounds like something that would resonate you, that kind of message, then maybe I would recommend it for you, but I just don't think it was an interesting enough topic for me personally. Some of the chapters were a little bit more relatable, but a lot of it was just saying different situations of early achievers and then different situations of late bloomers. So I did rate this 2.5 stars. It did not connect for me, so that's too bad. Next up, we have I'll Be the One by Lyla Lee. This was a young adult contemporary book. I think I read this one because I drew the card in my TBR card video to read a book with body positivity. So this book definitely has that. In this book, we're following a main character who is fat. She gets shamed a lot in her life, especially by her mom, and of course just general society over her body size, but she loves singing, she loves dancing and performing and putting herself out there. It's honestly really admirable that this character does not let the haters keep her down, but she ends up entering into this singing and dancing competition. Is like a K-pop competition that's going on in California where she lives. So she enters and she gets into the competition. It's actually a reality TV show. But just seeing her journey going through that and doing some of the different challenges, some of the different people that she meets, different friends, of course a love interest, just seeing how she deals with some of this backlash about her image. It is an uplifting, body positive story at the end of the day. I only rated it 3 stars. I think the YA effect kind of affected my opinion. I do think as an adult reading YA, it's just not going to hit as hard for me as it shouldn't. So that was something, and I just don't think the language was super authentic to teens. Sometimes it really does feel like it's on an authentic representation of young adults, and this one didn't really feel that way. It did feel a little bit cringe at times, and so yeah, it just wasn't the best book for me. But if you are into K-pop, if this kind of message interests you, then I would still recommend it. Like, I didn't hate it or anything like that, but again, just kind of the case of a book not really being for me. The next book I'm going to talk about is Say You'll Remember Me by Abby Jimenez. Of course, Abby is one of my favorite romance authors, and this book unfortunately came in at 3.5 stars. So this means that, of course, it's not a bad book with that rating, but it is my least favorite book from Abby that I have read. So far, I've only read her Part of Your World series. I didn't read any of her previous books. But yeah, this one wasn't my favorite. It was still a cute, overall enjoyable book, but we have these two characters. One is a vet and one is like working in social media. They have this kind of negative encounter when the girl is taking her cat to see him at the vet, but then he ends up making a better impression on her, ends up asking her out on a date, and they have this really, really amazing one date together before the girl, sorry I'm saying girl and guy, I forget their names, before the girl has to move across the country to California to be with her mom, who has, I forget if it's Alzheimer's or dementia, one of those, and she has to go help her family take care of her mom and obviously spend her last moments with her. So it's the major conflict is this distance, this long distance in the relationship, and I just found that wasn't interesting enough for me as a conflict. I feel like we've seen that before in Abby's books. Just started to get a little bit repetitive of, okay, these characters are missing each other, they're not able to see each other, then they are able to in this special, trip, but it's costing a lot of money and blah blah blah. Like, I don't know, it just started to get a little too repetitive for me. I still think the relationship was sweet. I still like the main guy. Abby always is really good at combining humor and some lightheartedness with obviously darker themes as well, obviously with the Alzheimer's, and then also there's some abuse one of the characters passed as well. So I always do appreciate that from her. It just wasn't quite that 4-star read of like, this is a solid romance or a solid book that I really liked. Let me know what you thought down below though. And next up is another young adult contemporary. We have The Way I Am Now by Amber Smith. So this is actually a sequel to the book The Way I Used to Be. It was a book that came out quite a while ago. It was about a main character, Eden, who experienced a traumatic sexual assault. We're really just seeing how her life was impacted by that, her mental health throughout her teen years, and how she was not able to really be open with anyone about this incident and the effect that it had on her psyche. This is a follow-up book. We're seeing her as she's entering college, and we're also focusing on Josh, who is her love interest, who we met in the first book as well, but in this book he has a point of view. So we're seeing more of like both of their different lives. They're both recovering from different traumas, as Josh has an alcoholic father and other things that he's working through, as well as helping Eden too. I thought it was really nice. I gave it 3.75 stars. I only took up the 0.25 because of it being young adult and it not quite connecting as much for me as I already talked about earlier in the video. But I do really think this was a solid book and a solid sequel. I said this in my vlog during the month, but this series almost reminds me of like an And It Ends With Us situation, where the first book focuses on our main character and the abuse she faced, and the second book is really more focused on the romance she has with her new love interest and her recovering. This is also an own voices story, so I do think all of the topics that are very serious topics were dealt with very well, and I would recommend this for young adult audiences as long as they are kind of in a good mental state and are prepared for something like this and the darker topics. but it was quite uplifting and inspiring as well, and I enjoyed the relationships with the characters. Unlike the other young adult book I talked about earlier, it felt more authentic and not as cringy. And so yeah, I'm glad that I read this, but I still do think I'm going to try to avoid picking up so much YA contemporary in the future. All right, a book I rated 4 stars is The Mothers by Brit Bennett. If you don't know, Brit Bennett wrote The Vanishing Half, which is a book I read quite a few years ago now, but I gave it 5 stars. So I've been waiting for a moment to read The Mothers, and I forget why I ended up picking this up. It was some TBR card that I pulled, but in this we're following our main character Nadia, and she is like I think a 16-year-old girl at the start. Her mom has recently passed away, so it's just her and her dad. So she's grieving, she's definitely going through it, and she starts up this relationship with an older boy who is the pastor's son, and she ends up getting pregnant. And so we're just dealing with kind of the fallout of that situation, how she handles the situation, and then we are seeing for a few years into the future. We don't only hear from Nadia's perspective, we are hearing from other people in the town, other people affected by this situation. We're also hearing from this mother point of view, where we're hearing from kind of this collective perspective of all the mothers in this town and who are involved in the church. Just a very human story, very character driven and enjoyable, although quite upsetting. Obviously, some of these topics are quite serious, and there are other ones too that I didn't mention. There's some abuse and things like that in this one as well, but also, you know, more positive things like female friendship and stuff like that. So yeah, overall I would recommend it, but obviously I don't think it was as good as The Vanishing Half, but I believe this one came out before that one. So anyways, I look forward to whatever else Brit comes out with. I hope there's something else soon, because I really do like her writing. And oh yeah, something else I mentioned in my vlog where I was reading this, it did kind of remind me of a Frederick Bachman book, of just kind of how the narration was told. So if you like his books, you also might like this. All right, moving on. I also finished Winter this month, which is the 4th and final book in the Lunar Chronicles by Marissa Meyer. You may have heard of this series. It was quite popular like 10 years ago or something. But this is a young adult sci-fi fantasy series. The first book, Cinder, then Scarlet, then Cress, and now Winter. It is also kind of like a retelling of some of these princesses or like fairy tale stories. So starting out in the first book, so we don't spoil the finale, but we have Cinder, who is actually a cyborg living on Earth. And she has, you know, an evil stepmother, evil stepsister, that kind of thing. And they make her just kind of work and do things around the house. They don't really treat her like an actual human being because she is a cyborg, and there's this like discrimination against them. There's also this like lunar sickness that has taken over Earth. Cinder ends up getting wrapped up in the whole mystery surrounding this illness and trying to figure out the cure for it. There is an evil queen named Lavanna who is from Lunar, which is a planet in outer space. So that's a sci-fi element. And anyways, each book we're introduced to a new princess. So Red Riding Hood in the second book, Rapunzel in the third one, and then it was Snow White finally in this one. I think Marissa did such a good job with this series. I gave the first 2 books 4 stars. The third one was a 5-star, and I did end up rating this 4.5. I just feel like it did start to get a little bit too long. Like this is 800 pages, over 800 pages. I do think it worked, but I don't know. I felt like it was going on a little bit long, but I do think she did a really good job of including chapters from all of our different characters that we've been introduced to throughout the series, and getting a nice little wrap up and arc of each of the characters and each of the couples. There's multiple couples for you to root for in this book, and so many great characters. So I just had such a fun time reading this, despite it being so long. It didn't feel like it, although it did feel like it when I was holding it. I was definitely like kind of annoyed to be reading that physically. But anyways, this is a series that holds up, even if it's, you know, came out a while ago. I still think you could pick it up now and have a really good time with it, because I did. The final book I read this month, my favorite and a 5-star read, is Not Quite Dead Yet by Holly Jackson. This is a thriller book. Holly is known for her young adult thrillers like A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, but this is actually an adult book. If you happen to have read it and want a spoiler-filled reading vlog and review, that probably was one of my recent uploads, so I'll link that so you can go check that out if you want. Obviously, I had such a good time with it. So in terms of my spoiler-free review, this is about a main character named Jet. She comes from this wealthy family, but she is kind of at a bit of a standstill in her life. She had to drop out of law school due to some health issues. She has this kidney disease. Anyway, she's not feeling super motivated, not feeling super great. At the beginning of the book, she's at this Halloween party that her family put on, and then she goes home, and when she's home, she ends up getting attacked attacked. And when she wakes up in the hospital a few days later, she ends up finding out that she just barely survived this attack. And now, due to the trauma that she's faced on her head, it's a brain injury, she is now going to die in 7 days. There is going to be this brain aneurysm that is growing and going to get activated, and she is going to die in 7 days. So she takes on the challenge of trying to solve her own murder. She wants to finally do something with her life. She only has this 1 week left, and that is her goal that she wants to accomplish, is solve who technically murdered her. Even though she's not dead yet, it technically is a murder because she's gonna die. So I thought that it was a really unique way to do a murder mystery, and it definitely was reminiscent of A Good Girl's Guide to Murder because we have this character trying to solve a murder, and so I find that really fun to follow. As always with Holly Jackson, I find her thrillers are just so fun to try to figure out the mystery, try to figure out who the killer is. She weaves all these things together, all these storylines together so well. You're given so many different characters to put on your suspect list. If you watch my vlog, you'll see I was constantly changing my theories, changing who I thought it was going to be. Ultimately, one of the instincts I did have from the beginning did end up being right, but it's one of those situations where you most likely are going to figure some of it out, but not the whole picture. So I just had such a good time with it. If you have not read any of her books yet, but you're a thriller lover, definitely check this out. Maybe the young adult of it all scared you away from her previous books. You can definitely check this out. Our main character's in her 20s, so a little bit more mature. Holly is also very funny, so there's a lot of humor in this book and so much heart as well. We're not just reading about characters who have no characterization, you don't really care about, you're just there for the plot twist. Like, you really are going to care about these characters, the relationships between them. It's so upsetting, it's so sad, and it's so good. Highly recommend, and yeah, this would probably be one of my favorite books of the year. So that is all for my July reading wrap up. Please feel free to leave me a comment down below if you have any thoughts on any of these books, or if you want to tell me about your reading month in July. Please also subscribe if you have not already for more bookish videos like this. I would really appreciate it. But yeah, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you soon with a new video very soon. Bye.